We're talking about staff. We're talking about cancellations with your students. We're talking about customer service. We're talking about a whole bunch of good stuff. So stick through all the way to the end. All right, let's kick it off. One of the things that we have always had in the Yogapreneur Collective, like internally, has been a sort of make it easy policy around where to find information that anyone needs to do something in the organization. But we're re-articulating that into our staff handbook. And this is how we have worded it at this point, where the question is, the answer should be. So I was thinking about this on a coaching call a couple of days back too, because the commentary came up around sort of the difficulty around getting staff to do certain things. And now Terry has a lot to add to this conversation. And one of the first follow-up questions or sort of audits that we had to do was ask, well, the thing that we need them to do, like, obviously, are they trained on doing it? Do you have a system for them to do it? But like, is the answer to any of the questions they would have, or is the mental trigger to remind them to do a thing a certain way, is it right there in front of them? Yes or no? And the simple example would be when we do a sales training with the team and we write out our two primary sort of sales structures, or we write out sort of like the whole first visit flow that someone should go through, we create a miniaturized bullet form list of it. It's only this big on a piece of paper, and we tape it to the back of the desk. And as janky as that sounds, there's still just nothing better than that, because it's right there in everyone's face all the time. Go through these 5 steps. You just need it there as the brain trigger. So where the question is, the answer should be. So a lot of the time when we're building SOPs, when we're building how-to guides, when we're building reminders for, sales scripts, et cetera, if I have to go find the answer somewhere, that's where there will be friction and where it doesn't work. So the challenge question is, how can you reiterate that stuff to be right there in the physical space that I'm going to need it in that exact moment? That's kind of the thought. Terry, what do you think on that?
You're mute.
Muted.
Okay, so I think that's a great idea, Josh. And what you specifically mentioned the first visit flow and having that cheat sheet there, as well as having the full script that we've talked about, that I've been working a lot with my clients on. And I mentioned this yesterday in a post I made yesterday, is to Josh's point, where the question is, the answer should be, and the question around how do we do this first visit flow. And it came up with one of my clients this week was, I can't ask my teachers to do that. I can't ask my teachers to do anything more. They're going to, it's like, I haven't, he's wanting to raise their pay, but not quite in a position to do so. I mean, they're going to ask for more money. There was a lot of reasons why. And then I challenged them by just simply saying, well, are you really asking them to do something more? Or are you just asking them to do something they're already doing, but in a more thought out, logical, methodical way that every teacher is doing, every front desk is doing, so that what you're doing is creating a unique and consistent first visit for your new clients? Because again, the saying goes, you only have one opportunity to make a good impression. And I love what Josh says about, it's a big lift when someone walks in your doors, right? It's a big lift. They can practice for free online. You can, YouTube with Adrian, whatever. You go to YouTube, there's all kinds of videos there, right? They can go to their gem or the Y, where it's like really cheap. The fact that they came to you is huge. So that should be like, those people that walk in your doors are like gold. And why wouldn't you treat them that way? And why wouldn't you train your staff to do it? They're already doing it in some fashion. It's just not really thought out in most cases well. So sometimes in thinking about what we're doing with our staff, is that we're changing things. Are we really asking them to do more? In some cases, we might be. There might be a whole new recipe that you're at. That's a different scenario. I'm just talking about when you're tightening things up. Are you asking them to do more, or are you just merely giving them a new way to do it? that was sort of my epiphany for the week. Josh.
Oh, I just would double down on this. One of the things that's extremely frustrating as a coach working with yogapreneurs, specifically when we're on site and we have like this compressed time moment, right? We're there for a limited amount of time. We're really trying to get as much done as possible. We don't want to just say, here's some good ideas. Like, we're really hyper focused when we're on the ground of fleshing out what has to happen, to the strategy, to the full implementation, and all of the supporting documentation, and getting all of it completely done and in the business. The most frustrating part is in the midst of that, we'll have a staff pushback, not from the staff, but from the owner. This is all great. I like it. I want to do this. It's a good idea. But this hyper-specific one individual staff person is not going to do it. And so the two things about this that are kind of harsh truths, because understandably we want to treat our staff well and have a great environment and everything, but there are certain things where you're not asking someone to do more if all you're asking them to do is their job. And that's really where I think there's a paradigm shift that a lot of owners have to go through, because what happens is a studio, especially a legacy studio, you've been in the game for 10 years plus, and things kind of go a certain way. You're asking them to do more versus what they've done, but it's because they haven't been doing their job. Like, that's like the really blunt way to say it is half of your team isn't doing their job. And now you're just going to ask them to do their job and hold them accountable to it. That's not asking them to do more. So and that goes with the pay part of it too, that like, if they think they need to get paid more to just do their job, that's where the whole thing has to be sort of reevaluated and rediscussed. But even more importantly, and everyone knows this, but I think just have to come back to pushing the point now and again too. Your product is not your yoga class. Your product is a yoga experience, which is the total studio environment and the customer service that you offer. And in the yoga class itself, it's the teacher. And outside of the class, it's like what happens at the desk, what happens afterwards, the follow-up. That all inclusive is your product. So if you don't get your team to do the things you need them to do, if you don't train them, if you don't get them to offer great customer service, then your product sucks and your business will be hindered by that. That's the like kind of harsh reality. So it was one of these things where, although it doesn't have to be, I don't like the narrative that it's always going to be high friction, but it may be high friction for you right now with your team. It's so necessary for the success overall of your business that it falls into the no choice category. I just really don't see any alternative option, because the only alternative option that ever kind of comes up is, okay, well, I need to hire more people to just be at the front desk and be customer service people. Cool, do that then. Well, I don't want to have to spend more money to hire more people. We're like, well, what do we want to do? We want to grow the business or not? Do we want to give better customer service and improve our product or not? So I'm saying it's a little bit harsh, but it's just, this is one of these really common things that my heart goes out to studio owners on, because it's hard, but it's absolutely necessary. There's no choice to address this and to get it going, because it will literally undermine everything else that's going on in the business. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think this speaks to an industry-wide challenge. And like you said, when you get on site and you start to ruffle feathers and change SOPs and processes, the challenge really becomes, is the context. So yoga teachers go to yoga teacher training. And guess what they don't learn at yoga teacher training? Sales, how to work at the front desk, how to run software, etc. And if you wanted to differentiate your yoga teacher training, one thing you could do is teach them a little bit about the industry. And one of the big issues that I see is that contextually teachers often teach at multiple spaces. And so they think of themselves as a yoga teacher, and they don't think of themselves as a front desk person. Different studios have different processes when they get there, etc., but they're all different. Some don't have to do anything, some have to do everything, depending on the class, 6 a.m., maybe 4:30, it's all supported. So one of the things you could also consider is a big issue is, what does your job description? Who are you hiring? And that is a big issue. If you have a properly written job description with clear total expectations through an interview process, and you hire to those roles and responsibilities, you will end up with 80+% of the right staff. If you are a studio, which a lot of studios are today, challenged to just find enough teachers so the owner can stop teaching so many classes, then you end up taking, just about anybody who can teach a class or even teaches a decent class, but doesn't, work for your brand and your sales process, etc. So then you end up sort of chasing your tail and in limbo. And then you might pull somebody like our team in to do sort of an on-site. And then there is this sort of resistance from the owner because the experience, like you said, a 10-year studio has never really put this in place. So I do think there's a great opportunity in the industry. If you're a massage therapist, or you work at, Orange Theory, F45 or whatever, these different things, they have specific, like Massage Envy, they have specific expectations and they hire to that. And we as an industry could do ourselves a favor by start implementing some of that in teacher trainings, and even like part of the teacher training, like a secondary training, right? And then you send these teachers out there as professionals and they show up as, ready to work, So those are my thoughts, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it.
And I agree. And I think we need a new hashtag, Josh, hashtag harsh truth, right? And because I'm about to give another harsh truth is in some of my conversations with people we're working with on sites and working with the first visit flow and things like that, and getting the pushback on it, is they're like, well, my teachers don't want to have to do that because they want to connect with the clients, the students before class. Well, hashtag harsh truth, they're not connecting with their students. They're connecting with a group of students, the people they know and they like that have been coming forever. And they're being incredibly exclusive. And I always chuckle when on the website it says we're an inclusive community. And let's face it, I am like pretty white bread America, right? And I walk in and I don't feel welcome because the teacher is interacting with longtime clients. They're having conversations here and there. And can you imagine if I was not white bread America, how I would feel at your studio, even though it says inclusive on the website? I cannot tell you how many students I've walked into where this happens. And literally I have 2 teachers stand out in my mind over the span of 20 years. And that's pretty sad when you think how many yoga classes I've taken in 20 years at different studios, where the teacher actually came up to me and said, I don't recognize you. I don't know you. Is this your first time? I'm Kay. Tell me your name. Let me tell you, those people got a glowing Google review because it rarely happens. So my other hashtag harsh truth is when your teachers push back on that, they're really not. They're not engaging with the new people. They're not engaging with the dreaded CP, i.e. ClassPass people. They perceive them in a whole different way. So again, harsh truth, you guys got to wake up. You got to wake up and realize your teachers are not really engaging with their community. They're engaging with a specific subset of the community. Josh.
Well, what Terry's alluding to, for those of you who haven't done any one-on-one coaching yet with the coaches, our coaching program has a very strict no BS policy. So like, we're going to give it to you straight because we have to. That's our job as your friend, as your coach, is to give it to you straight. So that hashtag might have to be in there. The 2 things that are coming to mind, going back to Alex for 1 second too, and this is just a side comment, I agree with everything Alex said. If you are not brand new, because often I think the feeling might be like, well, I've been going this way for so long, like if I rock the boat, like that's actually harder and more scary than if you were just starting from scratch. You would just write up your contract and be like, here's the expectations, knowing what you know now, and that would be easy. But I just need to say out loud, like, you can change job descriptions after people are already working for you. You can do that. That's a totally normal thing. You just have to know that they cannot like it. And that's it. Like, they don't have to like it or not. It's the bigger picture of the success of the students that you have in your business, the service that you're in, that has to be the highest bar. And if they really don't like it, they don't have to work with you. Now, if you're really starving for staff, that's tricky, I understand. But realistically, it kind of has to be a little bit like that, where what you're doing is just putting politely and respectfully on the table an expectation list and offer for how to participate in the business, because it's that important. And they have to accept that offer or not. They can also not accept that offer, and that's okay. And that's the difference. It's not about making someone do something. It's about saying, this is the bar that I have set for the quality of this business, and I will uphold it. And you need to opt into this to participate. The only time we see real problems in a business over the long run, staff-wise, is when we have a small group of the staff who refuse to participate in the bar that's been set, and we can't hold them accountable on it. That's where the problem actually lies. Now, to what Terry was saying too, I would just add in, I think that the thing to remind ourselves of, two points here is, one, a lot of the time, especially teachers is a great example, they really honestly do believe what they're saying. They really honestly have the best intentions. They really think that the reason that you shouldn't have an iPad to let self-sign in is because it's going to prohibit them from connecting with people. They really believe that. So the issue isn't that they're pushing back on that necessarily, but that, or that they like are fighting against the business or don't want to do a good job. It's that they need a paradigm shift. They need a reframe around the details of why you're doing something. So a big part of when we do a sales training on site, Terry's been at the last couple with me, and we'll be at one next week as well. A big part of the sales training, the first hour to 2 hours of the 4 hours, is just talking about why sales are a positive thing in the business and why they matter to you as an entrepreneur to succeed. The how is really not that hard. We got to practice it, but like, it's not complicated. If you're not bought in on why we're doing this in the first place, you won't do the how properly. So with anything in your business, there's that element to it. And this leads me to the bigger point being, someone has to be the leader. We had a studio owner say not so long ago that they didn't feel like they were naturally a very good leader, and that the team was good out of the sheer luck of everyone being a nice person. But I don't agree with that statement in general. And clearly they were a good leader, because otherwise you wouldn't attract good people who do work with you, right? Like, so being a great leader, there are some common qualities, but there is no one size fits all way to be a good leader. We could have a whole roundup conversation on just what it means to be a good leader in your team. But for the sake of today's conversation, my suggestion is only that the first step to being a good leader is stepping up and saying to yourself, I am the leader of this thing. And like owning that wholeheartedly without any fear, because all of these other smaller things we're talking about, how to get people to do something, training them and motivating them, and when they push back or whatever else, if you haven't claimed your own internal authority that like, no, I'm leading this thing, then that will make all of those other things more difficult.
Yeah.
All right, there's my rant. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. I would say, high level, because what we're saying is that sales have to happen. We have to have procedure and policy at the desk, et cetera. And you have to have a path, right? It's either going to be all your teachers are going to be trained on X to Z or A to Z, or you're going to have support desk staff. What a lot of times you'll see is, there's a couple desk people, a couple teachers know how to sell, and it's kind of a hodgepodge. And basically what happens, everybody, is that your clients get it, different experience at different times of the week, different times of the day, depending on when they come to the studio. What we're trying to do is streamline and maintain that consistent brand experience. And to Josh, to your point, our studio was open 8 years, and I changed everything. I rebranded it, I expanded it, changed all the pricing structure. I went from 1099s to W2s, all in like 90 days, right? I mean, it was epic. And I had one-on-one conversations with every single teacher. I changed all their contracts, changed their pay rates, everything. And to your point, some teachers were like, no way, I'm out of here. They left, and guess what? They all came back because we took a very professional approach, changed all our expectations, minimized certain responsibilities, increased others, and told them, like, first of all, listened to them. Like, what is your experience with what's going on? There was some sadness, there was some frustration, there was change. Couldn't. So we listened, and then we explained what we were doing, why we were doing it. We even showed them some high-level numbers, and some of them still left. But when they went out there and they discovered that, geez, all these other studios are not organized, they don't have goals, they don't have intention, they didn't explain what was going on, they came knocking on the door again. And the next thing you know, we had a bunch of teachers that wanted to come back. So you do have to be a compassionate leader, and you have to own it, right? You're the name on the lease.
Teresa, just before you jump in, I just have to add to what Alice is saying. It's got me all fired up. Like, the idea of, we're talking about sales and sign-in process and these sorts of things, but literally, if you like zoom way out of the weeds, 30,000 foot view of your business, as the owner of the business, like, what are you building structurally? Like, what actually is it? Because this is where, in the yoga world, this is a weird thing where the vision of a yoga studio owner, typically, historically, that we've seen often, ends at build the studio, get some front desk and some teachers, teach some yoga classes, maybe run a teacher training, maybe a retreat. Like, that's the end of the vision for what we're building. So, but you can do all of that in like 6 months. So then what? So these processes, these standard operating procedures, going back to the first thing I said today, like where the question is, the answer should exist, et cetera, that structural stuff, that's the machine, that is the organism, that's the thing you're nurturing, that's what you're building. So I think that to Alex's point of like the relationship with the team and getting that in order is a foundational element of that, but you might find some strength in willingness to stick to your guns on what you're asking people to do when you view the whole thing as like, it's bigger than you and them. It's not about how much they love a specific SOP. It's about, does the SOP solve a problem, serve a purpose, and build the machine of your bigger business? Does it build up that whole organism more? Because that does have to happen. You do have to curate that if you really want to maximize your positive impact. Go ahead, Teresa.
I just wanted to throw a couple points into the mix. So as far as the point that Terry made, when people are coming into the studio, you know, one of the worst things that could happen is a new client comes in, they don't talk to anyone, they just go into the room, they take their class and they leave, and they don't talk to anyone. So that's obviously the total opposite of what we want to happen. Number one, because we're not building a relationship with them. But then number two, it also feels really crappy for the client, right? And so, like Terry mentioned, that she it only happened what, twice in the last year or something, that the instructor said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I don't think we've met before," you know. And most yoga instructors want to help people. And so even just reminding them that, you know, your first priority is first visitors, second priority is inter-offer people, third priority is members, right? I used to tell my staff, pretend like every new client is your new best friend, and to like kind of keep that in your mind, so that you're paying attention to them and not the people that have been coming for 3 years that you just had lunch with yesterday, and you can talk to them when you have lunch again. And so, because it's also helping that new client feel better about their experience and feel more confident in this new space. And in the studio that I sold, I still teach there. And there's no structure there now. The person that owns it is a full-time businessman. It just kind of like runs on its own. But I still do first visit flow. I still connect with all the new visitors, not because I have to, because I don't, because there's no one saying that this stuff should happen now. But I do it because of the individual people, because I want them to feel welcome and I want them to have a good experience. Even though no one's making me do it, I just care about that person. So thinking about it from that aspect too. And then to go along with the new hashtag harsh truth or hard truth? Harsh truth. A lot of times when these issues, well, first of all, when you are afraid to ask a staff member to change the way they're doing something, that answer that we hear so often, I can't ask so-and-so to do this, or my one staff member is not going to do this. You're making assumptions before you've even asked them. So that's the first problem that is happening. And then you're running the business from a place of fear by not wanting to ask them. You are talking about change, which is always scary, and you always build up things in your mind that things are going to be much more horrible than they actually will be when you actually make the changes, when you actually ask the staff members to make these, to implement these changes. And so the tendency is to default to do nothing and not ever ask them to make the changes, because you're assuming that they won't, or you're assuming that you'll get pushback. And so there's a little bit of harsh truth. You got to push yourself into it and not just ignore. And because sometimes we as coaches see situations where people have done this elaborate thing to work around ever asking these people to make any changes. And so then there ends up being a lot more effort involved. And so if you just have your staff on board, it's a lot less effort. And these problems, as was mentioned before, these problems have to be addressed in order to make progress in your business. You can't just keep working around Sally and John over there who won't ever do the first visit flow and just limp along with it and say, well, I'll hire new people that will. But then everyone that comes to their classes get a deep, not such a great experience. So,
mic drop. Preach. Get it.
We're going to move into cancellations. I wanted to talk about cancellations.
Yeah, I know you'd brought that up before. I think that's a good segue into, cancellations and having SOPs for your staff and stuff. That's another place where there's a lot of opportunity. You were just saying, Teresa, before that has been coming up for you with coaching.
Yeah, that's another place for opportunity. That's another discussion that's coming up a lot of times. It's another place where people will sometimes say, I can't get my staff to do this. But when I've had this come up a lot recently, where what do you do when a client wants to cancel their membership? And so the thing that we don't want to do is just send an email and say, okay, your membership has been canceled. We'll miss you. And then that's it. There are so many opportunities for saving that client. And so the most important thing that has to happen when you get a cancellation request is to make some sort of effort to save that person. And when I say save, that could come in a multitude of different things. You could put their membership on hold. You could actually save them and talk them out of it and propose solutions to whatever problem they think they're having with their membership or their practice or their schedule. You can downgrade them to a different type of membership, like a hidden back pocket 5 per month membership, or you could downgrade them for a certain time period and then they could upgrade again. So if someone's like having some financial difficulties, you could say, okay, I'll make your membership $30 cheaper for the next 2 months. And then after that, it'll go back to your regular price. Oftentimes, when people request a cancellation, they're going through some kind of frustration. And so they're not getting to class enough, their schedule changed, they're getting super frustrated, and it's just like, that's it, I'm going to cancel. And so there's so many times where if you actually have a conversation with them, not just an email, you can help them solve their problems and keep them as a client. So I'll kick us off with that, and then we'll go from here. Josh.
Yeah, I think cancellations, and the wording being like cancellation funnel. You're building, just like you have a funnel or a pipeline where someone comes in, you go through your first visit flow, they're in your intro, they go through a sequence of events to convert them to membership. It's the same thing on the other end. And it's something we see a lot of studios don't fully build out, or it's just, to your point, Teresa, like it's just not that robust. It's like a couple of things, and then maybe you try to ring the person up ahead of time or send them an email and they just like ghost you. They just don't respond. So building out a strong funnel and setting that expectation that they're going to have to go through it, which means right in the beginning when they sign up, cancel anytime subject to questionnaire or interview or something like that. Like just set the precedent up front that that's going to happen. The two questions, like there's more than this, but like the two questions to think about adding into the conversation with the person, whether that's no matter how that conversation takes place, would be basically you want to know, why are you leaving? Because if it's just like, my wife got a job across the country, we're just leaving across the country, like that's a different conversation. Then you just want good customer service with that person, versus I was practicing 6 days a week, now I can only make it 3. And you're like, well, that's still really good. So why are you leaving? Why are you canceling? But then the question that I see missed all the time that we want to add in is, what did or what do you like about practicing at the studio? So seems like an out of place question, because we're looking at their cancellation from a negative light, and we're assuming that that's the only reasoning behind cancellation. But the fact they were on membership, like they must have liked something, and we want them thinking and attached to that regardless of what happens with the cancellation. So what did you like about the studio is one of the questions that I would have in the questionnaire, or I would straight ask them if we're on the phone or in the email, to try to sort of flip the energy of what's happening around the conversation. And often that gets them to sort of admit to themselves the positive experiences they've had, which makes them theoretically more open to considering the downsells that you're suggesting, Teresa, of like, well, if this membership doesn't work, that's fine. Let's find one that does work, kind of thing, rather than this membership doesn't work, I'm going to quit altogether because I don't want the expense of the recurring payments or whatever. Go ahead, Kay.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said on this so far. And I wanted to add that there's another option too, like as far as saving them might mean like, yes, they're going to cancel, but they leave with like warm, fuzzy feelings about you and your business in their heart. So even if they just decided, you know what, I'm not willing to invest in a yoga practice right now, like for whatever, even if you think it's not a good reason, whatever it is, like have them leave you feeling good. And so sometimes that means if the frustration was like something to do with their experience at your studio, or like how, you know, the fact that they requested to cancel 8 days before, but you asked for 10 days notice, like, could you just kind of give them an oopsie there? You know, being a little bit like, yes, I totally believe you should have policies and a procedure that you absolutely stick to. And if it's going to cause somebody to leave with kind of a bad taste in their mouth versus a warm, fuzzy feeling, can you, with telling them like, usually we ask for 10 days notice, but in your case, I get it. Like it was a weekend, you only give us 8 days notice, no problem. I'm not going to charge you one more payment or whatever. So like having a little bit of flexibility to make exceptions on your policies. If they're definitely like, you've been through the whole thing, it's a hard no, they're leaving anyway. You just want them to leave like feeling good about you, because even if they're quitting, they may still send everybody they know your way. And we've experienced that multiple times with our business. Like people stop, even now, like we have an online studio. People are like, I'm going back to an in studio, I'm canceling. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like I can't compete with an in studio experience. And they're going to cancel, but because I left them with like great customer service and stuff like that, the next time they have a friend who isn't near a studio, they're going to send them to us to practice online. And we had the same thing, you know, people move away or they just like get another job and they can't make it to any of the class times, you know, stuff like that, but they can always send their friends and family. So your canceled members can be some of your biggest ambassadors, actually, if you handle it right.
Yeah, that kind of goes right into what I was going to say too, Kate, because, you know, there's that classic thing where if someone has a bad experience, they're going to tell 15 people. If they have a good experience, they'll tell even fewer. So yeah, you don't want to burn bridges as much as possible. And I think an important piece when you're handling the cancellation requests is to not take it personally. I think a lot of times we end up doing that. And I know when I had my yoga studio, when we first started, when I got a cancellation request, oh my gosh, it ruined my whole day. I would just be in a bed. And if I got 2 in one day, oh, it was just ridiculous. So I had to realize that this is, yeah, it's my business, but it's not a personal attack on me. And so you have to kind of let that go. And when you have, Kay literally cried on the floor of the studio. First cancellation, maybe. Yeah. So you kind of have to disassociate with that, with those feelings, because it's not a personal attack on you. And so what it is more of, I've hit the client is saying, I've hit some kind of roadblock where I feel that this is no longer working for me. And then you as the owner, need to figure out a way to help them get past that, to help them work through it. So think of it more as helping them figure out a way to continue their practice, as opposed to they don't like us, they don't like me, and they just want to cancel. And this goes into what Kay was just saying too. If they actually are canceling, and sometimes we get really hung up on, I posted everywhere that you have to give 10 days notice, and they had the audacity to try and do it with 7 days notice, you know, and you get frustrated with that. But again, picking your battles, let it go. You want to leave them with a good taste in their mouth. You want to leave them with a positive experience, and enforcing that cancellation period and making them pay an extra month will not really accomplish anything. You know, it will be like a drop in the bucket with your revenue, and that's it. So, Alex?
I just have to say, I know you guys have got your hands up, but to that point, those of you know that I was teaching at a studio where I paid for the privilege of a membership and a discounted employee membership so I could reserve my spot ahead of time. And one of the reasons I had to stop teaching was because of schedule changes, and they made a policy change, which didn't work for me. No harm, no foul. They still charge, I canceled my employee membership. They still charged me for 1 more month when I was gone for so much. I mean, it's literally, they still charge me. And guess what? I have such a bad taste in my mouth about them now. I'm like, seriously? I was just like, really, really, can you tell? Irritated. So,
Well, yeah.
and I worked for them, for goodness sakes. So anyway, but I'm keeping it professional. I'm not trash talking them or anything like that, because, you know, never pays to trash talk and burn bridges. But inside, I'm like, "Argh." So,
Yeah, we know it doesn't pay to trash talk, but your yoga students don't necessarily know that.
Yes,
So
yes, exactly.
not that you should be basing your behavior based on the fear of like a bad review or anything, but it is something to be aware of, that like word of mouth works both ways, right?
Yeah, I would say that, circling back to what Josh was initially saying about the why, right? To get a little granular, I think it's super important for studios to track the why of the monthly churn. And then as you track it, you know, let's say there's 12 different main factors why people leave. But you'll find that it ends up, 80% of them are in 3 or 4 buckets: price, policy, class time, whatever it is. And then as you track that first, second, third quarter, you can adjust. So it might be function and it might be value. So you might be able to add significant value to their membership, or you might be able to add a change in policy or perk. And that can have a huge effect. The other thing is to Kay's point, everyone's point, is that, it takes us 5-6 times the amount of money to get a new student in the studio. If they've come in and essentially had a good experience, but circumstances in life have changed in which they can't go to the studio and they end your membership, they're warm leads. And they are brand ambassadors, and they will buy gift cards, and they will move out of town and buy a gift card for a friend that still lives in their old town. There's so many opportunities with them. And I do find the other thing that someone, I think it was Teresa and Kay, you said, you guys were crying or whatever when someone canceled membership. If that's you as an owner, because we learn through story, and our story is our day-to-day. We open at 6, we close at 8, and we live all those experiences of our students. If you are that type of owner, it may be a great opportunity to have, people use yoga advisors, membership leaders, et cetera, so that they go through the function of the service that we offer when somebody terminates their membership and removes you from it. And then when you're not attached to that day-to-day as an owner, you can show up as your best self. And you see that student finishing up their last month or whatever it is, and you can connect with that student and you can give them value and hear their story and then send them on their way happy, even though they ended their membership. So it's there's a lot there for sure.
I'm going to play a tiny bit of devil's advocate here, but not really as a counter to anything that's been said, more like an additional clarifier. The only thing about the cancellation and why they're canceling and keeping them happy, I think that is the truth. That is the goal, right? It's not the customer's always right. It's try to keep the customer always happy, learn from what's happening, learn from your lived experiences, like Alex is saying, and adjust over time. But if you have clearly communicated your policies and they have agreed to it, and they're clearly outside of them, and there's no other reason, it doesn't mean you don't stick to them. So if I have a 15-day cancellation policy and you're trying to cancel at day 12, I'm not going to let you off the hook with that. That's the line in the sand that I've drawn. It's why your policy should be things that you're willing to stick to. If you are not willing to stick to your policy, if you have a 30-day cancellation, but you're going to let people cancel at day 28, that means you're not willing to stick to it. That's nothing wrong with people. The cancellation policy is probably not the best one for you. I would change it. So where I would make that transition is you can tell you've had the conversation with the person. We've asked them why they're canceling. We've asked them what they've liked about the studio. We've tried the downsell, and we get to this point where they're clearly disgruntled and they've asked you for that special circumstance. And then on your own accord, if you know that it's going to be good customer service, then yeah, sure, make a big deal about it. You know what? Let me just check on this. Yes, I can make this special exception in this one case for this, but the same thing on the other side, when we talk sales training, it's the idea of we'll just sell the person the intro after their first class. We'll just punt it to after class and then do it. You can do that, but that's if you've exhausted time and conversation before, and that's where you've ended up, that's to save it. That's not the technique itself. So same thing with the cancellation policy. I would just have to add in that yes, give good customer service. And if you need to be flexible on the policy or whatever in a one-on-one specific circumstance, sure, but don't make that the exception, not the rule. Stick to your policies. There is an element of respect that people will have for you to be able to simultaneously stick to your policies despite them not loving it, and still offer them very respectful, very nice customer service. Those, I just think now, those are the businesses that I actually want to do more business with in the future, are the ones that are hey, sorry, we can't do this because this is how we roll. but here's what I can do. And we really want to help you find the best solution to XYZ. Like, I actually respect the heck out of those businesses almost more than the ones that would just like back off and be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Don't worry about it. I'll do the special exception for you. If that's too easy, then it's like, then everything is up for question in that business. Their professional grade is lowered in my mind. So that's the only other thing I would add to that.
Thank you for adding that, Josh, because that actually totally clarified. I agree with that. Absolutely. And I think that this idea of like the customer, it's not that the customer is always right, but like, what can you do to keep them happy? So like a specific situation, maybe that I think that it would make sense not to like charge them the next month if they can't, if they give you 8 days notice versus 10, it's like, for example, if they're moving away, right? Like that would be a thing. Like if they're not going to even live here and there's no opportunity to use it, then that might be an exception that you would make. But it's, yeah, I agree. It's like last resort. I don't know if I would necessarily wait for them to ask for that, because in that situation, for example, like what else, if you don't have anything else to offer them, like it kind of doesn't really make sense to charge them for another month if they don't live anywhere near the studio. If you have an online membership, however, you could be like, hey, like no problem, we'll just apply your next payment towards 6 months of online membership or something like that, like whatever the pricing works out to. And in the case of like sometimes if somebody cancels and they, really short notice and they still get billed and they want a refund, but your policy is no refunds, that's a really good situation to go, okay, well, what can I give them? Can I keep a month on their account for the future? Can I offer them, okay, like no problem, you can use this month anytime you want, or you can give it to a friend, like all kinds of, there are always other things that you can do besides being too flexible on your policies. But yeah, so thanks for chiming in. I agree.
And I'm going to say, check your KPIs. What? Check my KPIs for cancellation?
Or have Terry do it.
Yes, because there's a couple of things we know. Yes, or have me do them. A couple of things we know hard and fast, industry standards, the average month on auto pay is 4 to 6 months. So what are you doing up to that point? What are you doing? Like ideally, if someone, and a lot of times, particularly since I don't have the time or something's come up, if a member hasn't practiced in a couple of weeks, that should be a red flag, right? Because the reason they're on the membership is to optimize an habitual yoga practice twice a week, and that's the value of the membership. If someone, and you know, it's not like they've gone out of town, they're away or they're at the daughter's, whatever, boom, you're checking in with them. It's like, hey, this is Terry from ABC Yoga Studio. Okay, we've noticed you haven't been in the studio in a couple of weeks. Is everything okay? So checking in with them, like, I know that Wallow does this and Mind Body does it. They have like at-risk clients. What are you doing as part of your process to check in with those at-risk clients? And then also, if you know that 4 to 6 months is the drop-off, then what are you doing in terms of nurturing, in terms of email automations and text campaigns and phone calls to make sure that you're regularly, routinely checking in with your members and giving them value. If you're consistently providing value and consistently providing that quality yoga experience, then I believe that their chances of canceling are way less likely. And, other than like I'm moving, or there is a medical reason specific, or, they need to, whatever that is, I think then some of that stuff will just kind of go away. So looking for those opportunities, building out those nurture campaigns. I've worked with some of my clients, working on 2-year membership nurture campaigns. So something else to think about is why wait, what are you doing so that you don't get the cancellation? That's my, I'll leave you with that thought. Alex.
Yeah, I was going to say high level to everyone's point, if you're a studio owner and you look at the last year, I mean, I would throw out a percentage here, but literally you should have less than 3% exceptions on as far as your, cancellation policy. So to Josh's point, you have to have a procedure and policy and cancellation in place that supports the life of your business. And it's reasonable and in place for the success of your students and you need to hold the business to it, the staff to it, and the students to it. If you have 3% exceptions over a year period of time, under these different circumstances, I didn't know I was moving, death in the family, this kind of thing, fine, you know? And so if you are a studio wondering, geez, what do I take away from this conversation today? You know, go back and look at your cancellations and see if you're making exceptions, you know, 62% of the time to your own policy. Well, now we might want to look at how getting some help with policy, right? And so that's one way of looking at it, and sort of takeaway is how I look at it.
Yeah, I like that. And I think to Terry's point though, too, and Teresa alluded to this a tiny bit earlier, preventative care. Like there's having a cancellation policy and funnel in place that makes sense for your business and having that whole SOP drawn out. And that's probably the place to start. But then you would start reverse engineering from that moment to be like, okay, now when are, like, especially if we're collecting the data that Alex was alluding to earlier, why are people canceling? Like, what are they actually saying? What are the common 1, 2, 3 reasons? When are they canceling? Checking your KPIs, like what's the average that's coming through? And then coming up with strategy around how would we prevent this from happening ahead of time? In my opinion, the majority of people canceling a monthly yoga membership, the moment of the cancellation is not sporadic. It's not like they were totally happy and then this week they're like, surprise, I quit. Like, unless you did something to annoy them or they had a massive life change, that's highly unlikely. What's more likely is they were petering off in their practice frequency. They were thinking about canceling for 1 or 2 months before that month. They're like, that bill came out again. I'm just not sure. Maybe I'm going to try something else. Summer's coming, this, that, the other thing. Like there's a deeper conversation that they've had with themselves. So by the time you're trying to like save it at the moment of the cancellation, they've already had this whole conversation and you haven't been part of it. So it's like, how do you insert yourself into that conversation earlier or reinvigorate their enthusiasm or help them commit more or whatever?
And I don't think there's any magic.
Preventative care.
Yeah, preventative. And I don't think there's any magic. I mean, this is just me making, you know, things up. Hashtag Terry's dad, 98% of statistics are made up anyway. So I'm just making up a statistic here, is that if we know that the statistic is 4 to 6 months, let's kind of look back to that, particularly in the United States, is that when they hit their plateau, right? Because we've talked a lot with a lot of my clients about that, is, again, just thinking of my own yoga journey, again, when you come from a point of a certain point, particularly as really like a beginner, because we know the more you do something, the less you see in progress, right? In the beginning, you might see a ton of progress in your yoga in terms of how you look, how you feel, all of those things. Then over time, you see less progress because you've gone from a 1 to a 5. I'm just using this as a scale in a quick amount of time. And you're like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, to move the needle from 5 to 6, it's really slowed down. Well, that's because now you're in a place where you actually have to work harder to see greater results. And then that, I think, is typically where people are like, well, this isn't working for me anymore. And they go try kickboxing, or they go try bar, or they go try Pilates. And then they see the same thing. And then 6 months later, they're on to the next thing. So again, knowing that, what can you do? I mean, literally some of my clients, we've inserted emails in that first 6 months about it's normal to hit a plateau. This is why. Sort of acknowledging the fact that, yes, you're going to hit a plateau. And here are some things that you can do. Or here's some, you know, this is what some of our and that's a good time to throw in like a testimonial for someone who's been coming for a while to say, yes, sticking with my yoga practice has led to this in my life. And it was because I created that habitual yoga practice. And it, you know, yes. So those are some things you can also do, is knowing that that's typically right around the time people hit plateaus. So there's just some little throwing that out to you all as well.
Or highlighting the progress they have made. I think a lot of the time people experience what they would describe as a plateau just because they've lost awareness of where they are in their journey. They don't realize. So it's just like highlighting that again. Yeah. All right. We're at the end of time for today. we probably have to pick up more of this conversation with a specificity. If you're watching this, what do you want to know about cancellation funnel? What's your cancellation flow? Is it more, and you say, okay, what's something that you found that has worked? Is there anything outside of the box? Make sure you're posting it down there. Final thing for today, the Yoga Business Summit. We are currently in the Yogapreneur Collective members only moment. It's like the pre-sale. We have not announced it to our entire email list. We have not run ads on it. We have not pushed it through our partner network. We have not done anything about it outside of the YC. So I would just say, jump on it quick. Spots are filling up. There are, let me just check right now. There are only 4 total spots available at the YC special price, which is a 25% discount. There are some shared accommodation options. There's also some private casita options, et cetera, et cetera. And just keep in mind, I'll do another video about this in the network, but the Yoga Business Summit, this is our annual visionary retreat. It's in November. You come for a week and we plan out your entire next year. This is inclusive of pre-work coaching call, pre-work group call, the summit, a post-coaching call, and a quarterly check-in on your goals. So this is like literally how do you, as the leader of your business, managing your team and your staff, get hyper-focused on the biggest dominoes that are going to be the most impactful for you, put a plan in place with guidance and help from your peers and coaches, and then have someone there to help keep you accountable to make sure that it happens. That all happens when you come to this summit. So I'll post a link in the chat, but if you haven't grabbed your ticket yet, only maybe a few days left before it's going to be publicly announced. Fills up every year. So just, we're going to keep reminding you guys about it. Other than that,
well, I was just going to say also, if you don't have a business coach right now and you'd like to talk about any, more in depth with any of the things we've talked about today with your member cancellation, if first visit flow, anything like that, we all, book a free coaching call with any of the coaches. We'd be happy to talk with you about some strategies and techniques that you could use right now. These free coaching calls are not just us telling you stuff. We want to make sure that you go away with actionable items in that free call. So book with any one of us. We'd love to chat with you.
You bet. All right, you guys, have a great weekend.